Very good. Welcome everyone.
Molto bene, benvenuti, benvenute e grazie di esservi connessi per seguire la nostra conferenza di oggi. Vorrei iniziare con qualche nota introduttiva prima di passare.
So, around a year ago, the Greens EFA came forward with a position paper called A Fair and Efficient Asylum System, and where at its core, we put the concept of voluntary solidarity. So the idea that we already have many municipalities that are willing to accept asylum seekers, and we thought that this should be anchored also in the future European asylum system, and that's basically the demand we put forward. After that, we thought a lot about how we can actually showcase this huge amount of voluntary solidarity that we already have to make this point even stronger, and also to send a bit more of a positive message about asylum and the willingness of our continent to actually welcome the people in need. And we then came up with two amazing data scientists which helped us, Federica and Alex, with this map, Your Welcomes, where we already by now showcase around 700 municipalities that are currently already willing to welcome asylum seekers. For me and for us, I think as a group, the idea of this map is threefold. First of all, honestly, just to showcase this positive narrative, to show that there's so many people who are actually willing and so many communities that are actually willing to welcome asylum seekers. Second, to give all these people that ask what they can do to improve the European asylum system also something to do, which is very simple. Reach out to your local councillors, reach out to your local mayors to make your community also a community that welcomes asylum seekers. And third, and that's much bigger in like the systematic approach, but not much bigger than the actual individual action, is also anchor the concept of voluntary solidarity from the European Parliament's perspective and via the EU in general into the EU asylum system. So these are the three goals, if you like, from this map as a whole. So I'm very excited and glad that today we have an interesting group of local representatives, if you like, so mayors, NGOs, and MEPs together to discuss how voluntary solidarity is already taking place today, what it looks like in the first panel. And in the second panel, to understand how we can make it even more prominent and more of a centerpiece of a future European asylum system. So both of these I'm very much looking forward to. So before I pass to our first speaker, who's State Secretary for Integration and Migration, Claudia Pereira, and maybe just some ground rules. I think we all attend many events, and so we thought we try to make it a bit more interactive on our panel. So rather than just having statements one after each other, I would encourage you to build on each other's points during the panels, and so that there will be a bit more of a talk show format, if I can say that without decreasing the level and the niveau of our interventions, but in terms of the interaction. In the chat box, you will see that there will be relevant links posted. So for example, a link to the map that I've been referring to, and feel free to just look at the information package that we will also post there. You can use the question tool within Zoom. It would be helpful if you also identify yourself with your name and, if you like, your organization when you ask questions, but feel free to address these questions, and the panelists and the moderators will be trying to take these up as much as possible. The event is live streamed on Facebook, on YouTube, and that's all when it comes to housekeeping. And so I'm very happy now to pass on to the State Secretary. Thank you so much for being with us today here, Claudia and Pereira, and opening this event. And I'm very much looking forward to the whole event and will be active listening. Thank you, Claudia.
Many thanks and good afternoon. And it's really a pleasure to be with all of you here today. And I would like to congratulate the organization, to greet all the speakers and everyone who is joining us today. And as we all know, to start, migration is one of the most relevant topics of our time. And integration policies structure the way the governments frame and perceive migrant populations. This is very important for us. Portugal sees migration as an opportunity, and it's committed to improve the integration of refugees in society, working towards orderly, safe and regular migration. The new Pact for Migration and Asylum stresses, as Damien is saying, a fair sharing of responsibility and solidarity, that is essential to promote European values. Portugal has been actively participating in the European effort to welcome and integrate refugees, and we want to receive more and to integrate even better. Viewing an European asylum policy based on the principles of responsibility and solidarity and respect for human dignity. For this effort, we established a decentralized integration programs that counts of a network of more than 300 municipalities that have been welcoming refugees in their communities. And municipalities responded in a two-folded way since 2015. First, by welcoming directly refugees into their community, representing almost 20% of the welcoming effort. And secondly, by providing integration resources into their territories where refugees are welcomed. And refugees were welcomed in more than 100 municipalities. We recognized the ability of municipalities to accelerate and build more effective and sustainable integration processes, because in fact the success of integration policies lies in the local level, as this conference also stresses. And it is in the community that we manage to encounter effective paths of integration. I would like to share with you a testimony of a specific Portuguese municipality, Fundão, that is located in the interior center part of Portugal, that sees migration as an important resource to promote social cohesion. Therefore, this municipality, Fundão, has been welcoming refugees alongside with international students and migrant workers, providing a common reception center, ensuring not only access to food, housing, healthcare, and education, but also learning Portuguese, access to training and to labor market, legal support, interpretation and translation, always promoting the interaction of refugees with other migrants and with Portuguese. This is a successful integration model fostered by a municipality that could and should be replicated in order to promote social cohesion and enhance the revitalization of rural territories in a low-density region. A win-win process for refugees and communities that we will continue to implement. And as in the presidency, and now moving to the Portuguese presidency of the European Commission, we have been in close contact and to foster the action plan for integration and inclusion. In fact, long-term investment in holistic integration policies, in a multi-stakeholder approach, is a key factor to address the challenges of migration and improve its benefits. This plan is in line with the integration policies we have been developing in Portugal since 2007. We have 116 centers to integrate migrants in the local level that now also respond to the needs of refugees. So in the whole territory, we decentralize these local centers to integrate migrants and refugees so that there be a more structured local answer. We also have been promoting dialogue at the technical and political level to enhance integration policies at national level, for which European financial tools are essential. We intend to continue this process and to help municipalities being part of our common challenge. In fact, the work towards the achievement of better integration policies for refugees stresses the importance to ensure the migration happens always in safe, orderly, and regular ways. This is a path that we keep envisioning, and we were the 6th member state that relocated more persons between 2015 and 2018, and we are a country with 10 million population. We have been welcoming resettled refugees even during the pandemic. We are also participating in the voluntary relocation scheme. We welcomed in Portugal 78 unaccompanied minors, and in the next days will come more. And although they are welcomed by social partners in the context of our national protection system for unaccompanied children, municipalities have been critical, ensuring local resources for integration. We also celebrated a bilateral agreement with Greek authorities to welcome refugees in Portugal, and municipalities will be part of the welcoming effort. So migration, as we all know, and we always need to be remembered, is a development for societies of origin, transit, and destination. We want to ensure a more supportive and inclusive Europe, where no one is left behind. Municipalities play indeed a crucial role as facilitators. Governments also in the implementation of structural integration policies that foster local actions and success stories as the ones in Fundão, the Fundão municipality. So it's time to actively act to promote spaces that are safe for those who need us most in a win-win process. Thank you very much and keep safe.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for your introductory remarks. One little housekeeping thing in between, we do have interpretation in Italian, German, Spanish, English, and French. So if you want to listen to this conference in your local language, and this is one of them, feel free to do so. You can do this in the settings of Zoom on the top right corner, at least for me. Good. With this, I'll pass over to our first amazing moderator, Terry Schulz. Thanks so much for moderating this first session.
Thank you very much, Damian. I'm very privileged to be here with all of you and such a well-attended session. I'd like to thank everyone who's joining us on Zoom or on Facebook Live for the first panel, The Experience of Welcoming Communities. I'm Terry Schulz, as Damian said, and I'm a journalist, and I'm going to be guiding us through this first panel of really, it's going to be very packed with information and experiences, and I think it's really going to be interesting for all of us, curious to hear more about those communities that you can see on the map at europewelcomes.org. It's a fascinating travel to go through this map and see what communities are doing. And I really hope that everyone takes the time to do that because, of course, to those of us covering the story, to those of us working on these issues, it often seems like Europe is nothing but a closed door. So it's very reassuring to hear from communities that are really opening their arms. So my panel has some very, very interesting participants here. I'm going to introduce them to you, and then we're going to also leave time to take questions and to have the panelists also interact with each other. So introducing first the Deputy Mayor of Leuven, Lise Cornet. Lise has a background in social work, and she is now the Deputy Mayor for Housing, Equal Opportunities, and Local Global Policies. So she has a lot of influence over these issues. Leuven is the second city in Flanders, where I also live, to sign the UN's Declaration of Solidarity with Refugees, which pledges it to provide access to housing, healthcare, and education, and to work to further those issues. Alina Liapina will speak for Seebrücke. That's a grassroots movement for municipal reception of refugees active in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. She also will speak for the European platform From the Sea to the City. These groups advocate creating safe routes for refugees on sea to reach Europe and also ending the criminalization of rescuing people at sea, which we've seen happen with such tragic consequences, even just in the last few weeks. Syed Hasnan is the president of UNIRE, the Italian National Union for Refugees and Exiles, which is the first national network of refugees living in Italy. Syed is himself a refugee from Afghanistan. He is also a member of the expert group on the view of migrants working with the European Commission, and he's also active in the European Coalition of Migrants and Refugees, which is based in Brussels. Filippo Miraglia is in charge of national immigration for Arci, an Italian association of more than 4,000 clubs and 1 million members dedicated to improving migration policy and economic and social rights for vulnerable people. And finally, but not least, European parliamentarian Damian Krem, the chair of ANVITA, which is the National Association of Welcoming Cities and Territories, bringing together local authorities, groups of communities, and elected officials behind the goal of unconditional reception and dignified hospitality. Now, Damian, very interestingly, was mayor of the French commune of Grand Centre, where he built a humanitarian camp for migrants and refugees in defiance and without the support of the national government, in cooperation with Médecins Sans Frontières. So he is going to be telling us more about that, how difficult a situation that is, but how some people persevere and succeed. So again, just to remind you of our housekeeping rules, please post your questions and answers in the Zoom. If you have a certain person that you would like to direct your question to, please identify them for us. And for all of us, me, perhaps most importantly for the interpreters, I need to speak slowly, and to all of my participants as well. So I am going to start with Alina and Filippo at the grassroots, or in some cases with Alina, the sea level, and to hear how some of your movements are helping create welcoming societies, what particular needs you're addressing, what you believe you can realistically achieve. What kind of challenges are you facing in pushing for these issues with national governments? Alina, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Dari. Thank you for inviting me, guys. The movement Zeebrugge, or Seabridge in English, was founded back in July 2018. I hope I speak slowly enough. During the standoff surrounding the search and rescue ship Aquarius. And so naturally, our initial focus was on providing safe passage, or in our case, safe harbor, to refugees stranded on the central Mediterranean route. Today, though, we widen our scope and demand a complete evacuation of the Greek camps to the willing communities in Europe. So our goal is to demand and provide safe, legal and direct pathways for refugees and migrants arriving in Europe based on municipal reception, not detention in camps. And this has been our main campaign. It's been very successful. For example, we have roughly 260 cities in Germany alone that declared themselves safe harbors and ready to welcome refugees. But the main obstacle is the German government that's been largely ignoring the efforts of the cities, and basically using the EU deadlock as an excuse not to relocate people to Germany.
Because let me just ask a technical question there, Alina. Without the cooperation of the German government, any people who are outside of Germany that want to make it to these communities basically are forcing themselves into illegal routes to get to Germany, right?
Exactly, that's the point. And the other thing is that sadly, German municipalities, but it also applies to Switzerland and Austria, are not allowed to launch reception programs by themselves. In that terms, they are dependent on the willingness of the German government to do that.
And as we've seen, governments, as you say, even if Germany were willing or wanted to portray itself as willing, there are so many governments that aren't, that the relocation system has remained completely hamstrung and not as effective as it looked on paper to begin with. Isn't that true?
Absolutely.
Filippo, let's hear from you. Let's hear about how Archie's experience compares with that Alina just told us about.
Intanto, grazie.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much for inviting me here. Well, in Italy, I must say, there is a public government welcoming system, which is managed by municipalities, which unfortunately is not what welcomes most refugees or asylum seekers, but this is a voluntary system. So municipalities that participate in this government system, which is funded by the central government, by the Home Ministry, by the Home Office, they must be willing and ready to welcome people. So this has been the system since 2002, so for almost 20 years now. And at the moment, the municipalities that welcome asylum seekers or refugees in Italy are many more in terms of projects, but they belong to 760 projects, 800 projects, but 1,000 municipalities are part of these projects, and these projects are about adult asylum seekers, unaccompanied minors, families, women along with children. So all these projects are funded by the central government. Unfortunately, this part of the welcoming system is not the main part, because then there is a part which is managed directly by the Home Office, by the Ministry of Interior of Italy, and by the so-called prefectures, which is the organization of the Ministry of the Interior of the Home Office, the local organization. And this accounts for 70% of all the people that have been welcomed in Italy. So we have around 800,000 people that have been welcomed in Italy. Around 70% has been welcomed by these prefectures. So it is directly managed by the Ministry of Interior. And the so-called communities or municipalities, they account for around 25% or slightly more than 25% of the people who have been welcomed. So
okay,
this is a voluntary-based welcoming, which started in 2002, as I said, and there's a very important role of associations, of NGOs, because most times it is associations that request the municipalities to join this public system, which is the public system of welcoming and integration.
Okay, thank you very much. So interesting how the breakdown happens in where the authority is coming from and where the assistance is coming from. Now, I would like to remind anyone or to inform anyone who might have joined us late that you do have interpretation there on your Zoom call. So if anyone needs to hear a different language, as Filippo was speaking Italian there, you can get it on your translation button. So Said, I wanted to move to you. You're also there in Italy, where you helped create UNIRE, the first national organization of refugees and exiles. So I'm sure you can share with us some firsthand examples as a person who arrived in this system, as to how you got the help, where you got the help, where you didn't get the help, and perhaps now that you're working to make the situation better, how you have been able to sort of improve the welcoming system for people who are new arrivals.
Thank you, Terry, for such an interesting question. So I would like just to point out an important thing. If we, as we are going to speak about welcoming cities and communities, I think if we have more refugee speakers and faces in this kind of panels, it will be even more welcoming societies in Europe. So I just want to maybe speak about my personal experience that reflects the experience of many refugees. So in 2007, when I arrived, I was in Greece, so I tried to cross the borders, and with the help of smugglers, I arrived under the truck in Italy. And when I arrived here, so it was quite a dangerous journey. And luckily, there was, for me, it was my intention was not to stay in Italy. I wanted to go in UK, but I was welcomed by an Italian pizza shop owner, and he just gave me like basic supports and services. For example, a shelter for one night, and also providing me food, warm clothes because it was winter. So that kind act of this person, it felt me welcomed, and I decided to stay in Italy. So it means that every person in communities, in cities, in municipalities, they can do a lot, and every action counts a lot. So and obviously, if you feel welcome, then you stay in that country. Unfortunately, there are like many policies that makes complicated the situation. So regarding the best practices, as our organizations, we have a very good collaboration on an interesting project with the municipality of Bologna. So we organize capacity building and training session with other refugee and migrant communities in order to organize them and to give them the opportunity to be organized, and also to have a more productive and active role in the whole society, because it means that they have more leadership and agency in order to welcome other newcomers in host societies.
Well, that's a very story. And for all of us who sometimes feel overwhelmed by the problem, by the numbers coming in, and sometimes people throw up their hands and think, I can't do anything. The message from you, Syed, is all of us can do something. Be kind, right? Exactly. Just being kind. For one night can make a difference in someone's life forever. So that's a really important message. I appreciate you sharing. Now I'm going to speak with Lise, and she in our talks ahead of this event, I learned that she has sort of a dual responsibility here in both providing a welcoming message for the new arrivals, for refugees and migrants, and making sure that message is clear and loud, but at the same time, in doing this, pressuring the national government of Belgium to also get the message that Leuven wants to be a welcoming place. So certainly your communications are headed in two directions, aren't they, Lise? And that must be a difficult job.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. So indeed, I think Leuven is trying to send this message to refugees, but also to higher authorities. Let me start with saying that Leuven is a progressive city, has a very social community. We are a university city of 100,000 inhabitants and more or less 50,000 students. And we already have a very international public, but we also had a very large influx of refugees. I think between 2014 and 2017, we had the second highest number of newcomers of all the Flemish cities. And of course, it didn't stop. We welcomed refugees the last years, and also in the context of family reunification, we also had a lot of newcomers in our city. So we really know that cities have a very important role to play because almost 2/3 of the refugees arriving in a new country, they settle in urban areas. So we have a lot of initiatives to welcome them and to integrate them on several levels, initiative by the government, by grassroots organizations, and we notice a lot of engagement and appreciation in our community. And I think the initiatives are indeed we can divide it in two pillars. The first pillar is more on this higher level, promoting solidarity and taking a stand in relation to the higher authorities. And that's really a part of our local global policy, because Leuven, we really know, and we want to stress this, Leuven is not an island. We want to know what is happening in the world. We want to take action for a more social and just world, for more sustainability. And that's why we subscribe human rights, the sustainable development goals. And for example, we signed the UN's declaration. You already said it in the introduction, the Declaration of Solidarity with Refugees. We also launched a call for more action to the national level, and it was in particular after the fire in Moria. But I think we can talk about this initiative later. But for example, we also hosted a big solidarity event of one of the biggest NGOs in Flanders, a fundraising event in 2019. Last year it was cancelled. We all know why, but in October we will organize it again together with the Vluchtelingenwerk, the NGO that is organizing, it's an umbrella organization for all the refugee initiatives in Flanders. But then the second pillar, we also have a lot of concrete initiative in context of welcoming refugees and their integration. For example, we have the Nomade. It's a house for young refugees between 18 and 35 years old. It was opened in September, I think. And these young people can find all kinds of services in one place. And it's the goal is that they can find all the answers about their questions about living, housing, employment, leisure, education, all in one place, and not the organizations have their desk there, but it doesn't feel like an office. It's a very informal place where they can meet each other. They have ownership of this place. They can organize things together, but also make connection with Leuven residents. Also, a lot of volunteers are active in Leuven. They are helping with language, with finding a place to live. And I think this really is important, because we can say, it's quite easy to say, oh, the refugees are welcome. But these volunteers, they are doing the real work. They are facing the real struggles together with the refugees. They are standing with them shoulder on shoulder. They're facing discrimination on the housing market and so on. And when they say that we as a Belgian community are capable to do more, I believe we can. And when they ask us as a local government to use our voice, we have to do it. So it's really on these volunteers that we are building, and we can, they are doing the real job, and we as a local government, we have to support it.
That's true. I mean, it's one thing to have the regulations that allow this. It's another thing to have people go out and do it. And I've seen you out holding signs yourself, Lise. So you are actually making good on your word to not just sit in an office and make rules. But I wanted to ask you about this as an immigrant to Belgium myself. But typically, let's be honest, not the kind that gets the door shut. I come with a job, and I don't face a lot of those difficulties. Tell me, how does the national government of Belgium ever ring you up and say, hey, Lise, knock it off? We don't want to portray this image. We don't want to look like we want more people coming here. What kind of pushback do you get from the national government?
So in September, we organized, we make an opinion statement, a letter we sent to the national government, and it was supported by 30 organizations, and we really asked Belgium to do more, to organize itself, and to bring more people here, especially minors, children in the Greek camps. But actually we didn't had any answer to this, so it was very disappointing. So we really, we are doing our job here, and we keep on saying and repeating this message, and we hope that we and other cities, that the government will listen to us and take its responsibility, like we are doing on our level. We also think that the national government has to do it.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to share a message that we're getting on the Q&A from Wolfgang Schmidt, saying that he really appreciated your story, Syed, and that this is indeed, as we journalists also know, this is the way we help people understand the experience of refugees and migrants, and of the people on the receiving end. And really, this is how we help everybody understand that we're all together in this job of making the world safer for people. And that's a perfect transition to Damian, because he is another politician who walks the walk, and in the face of heavy opposition from not just the national government, but of course, many other forces, you went ahead and constructed a residence. I mean, for people that nobody else wanted. I've been to Calais. I've done the story there when they're, taking it apart to as if that's going to stop people from coming, right, Damian? We know it doesn't work. So tell us about your experience, what you did instead of pretending that people were going to go away if you simply made their living conditions more difficult. This is a really interesting story. I just watched a documentary on it as well, so I'm extremely interested in this.
Alors, mon histoire, en fait, j'ai été maire d'une ville qui s'appelle Grande-Synthe, dans le nord de la France.
I was the mayor of a municipality 40 kilometers south of Calais. So we had a certain flow of people, 2,500 people, all of a sudden in 2015 came over, and they didn't want to seek asylum in France. They wanted to leave to go to Great Britain. They were actually blocked there, and back then the French government had no means of no answers for them. So we had to do something about it. And there were people who lived in inhumane conditions, and we didn't just want to accept things as they were. So with people like me, we created a camp to give better living conditions to these people on a day-to-day basis. This was not totally under my control, but it was my responsibility. And so as a mayor, I could not just afford to have people who were starving to death, literally, in my territory. I couldn't just forget about them, just let them die like that. So the state, the government did not attack me at a certain point. They even recognized I had done a good thing because I also found the money to pay for the camp. And having created this national association of welcoming territories and cities, 5 municipalities, 3 regions, and 3 departments, Paris, Bordeaux, Strasbourg, Lyon, and many others. And they're very small places up in the Alps, very small villages. I mean, we have been able to do something that governments in Europe don't seem to be able to manage. So at that point, it's mayors who take over and deal with the situation to help people who have no access to hygiene, sanitation, food, shelter. And so we needed to take care of that. As a mayor, I cannot just go see a person and ask them for their IDs and make a decision on whether they're eligible to be there or not. But as a mayor, I have to take care of their living conditions. That falls within my responsibility. And so we want the state takes now responsibility, but if the government is not there, mayors need to do as much as they can within the realm of their responsibilities and options too, and favor also the social integration of these people. Now, undocumented people, people in transit towards Calais, or people who are seeking asylum, or whether, I mean, there are many different people who come over, and just to make this short, the situation can be very, very difficult. And a question showed up in the chat about this. We are sending people back, pushing people back to their countries of origin, but there are even countries where we can't send them back because their country doesn't want them back. So these people who cannot stay and cannot go back, well, we need to be brave enough to take care of them and make them part of our communities. Now, we in France, there are 50, 60 administrations who say we are in favor of keeping these people here, and we need the government, the central government, so that this welcoming effort is well organized. And we see that this experience is now at the scale of a nationwide network.
That's right. And Damian, do you see that the European Parliament, just a brief answer, please, we're getting some questions for the other panelists as well. Can the European Parliament, where you sit now, can it do more? Because we often hear passionate speeches on the floor of Parliament about how different countries aren't doing enough, but that doesn't necessarily mean that member of Parliament's passion is translated into the ground on their member states, right?
Alors, le Parlement, il est plus progressiste.
The Parliament is more progressive. The Parliament has always adopted opinions such as the Dublin Directive that gathered a majority of the 3/4 of the parliament, but it's still not working because it's the council that is not not implementing it. So it's not the parliament. The bottleneck is not the parliament; it's the council. And we need to make all the evils of society in terms of jobs, migrations, etc., etc. I mean, they should not use them just for political reasons. They should take a humanitarian approach to it. So that's where the bottleneck is.
One of the bottlenecks. One of the bottlenecks. Lise, we have a question for you. And this is about people who come here who actually probably never have a chance to be recognized under one of the protections of a refugee or of an asylum seeker, yet they stay in this sort of limbo status with no ability to actually join society, get a job, pay taxes, but they send their kids to school. The children feel like they're a member of that society to some extent. They'll never be regularized. What do we do for those people? And as Damian mentioned, and we'll also address this with the other panelists, some of them are being sent back to countries that those children have never stepped foot in. And this really seems cruel, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it's a very important question, I think, because it's also one of the challenges for our city, because yeah, it's logical. You don't have a lot of numbers about it. It's they live in like a gray zone for sometimes, and actually we. It's one of the action plans that is in our strategy against homelessness. We organized a big counting of people that are homeless in our city, and that reported a lot of people that live in this situation, but we don't have the right answers for it yet. So it's really a new challenge for our city to get to know more about these people, their situation, and their network, because we also know that they have like a whole own network that they can count on, but we also want to support it. And we also know that they are very they don't have access, and they're really afraid to access our regular helping institutions. So yeah, it's really a challenge, not only for us as a city, but also our colleagues in the national parliament are working on this topic. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I wanted to switch back now to Alina, Syed, and Filippo, because we got a question about what from Cloud Brown about what can we do to increase political pressure on central governments, knowing many towns and villages are willing to take more than central governments are going to help facilitate. So for the three of you who work on this side of things, what are some of your tactics to try to pressure the national governments to allow towns, municipalities to do what they're willing to do, what their hearts are calling on them to do? Alina, let's go back to you. Can you start?
Sure. The success of our strategy is basically a combination of factors, right? We organized Germany-wide as a movement. We have 100 local activist groups that are really doing the main bulk of political work, pushing the local governments, but also regional and national authorities. Besides strong structure, we have with a combination of broad networking with other initiatives, but also street politics, such as mass mobilizations and direct action. We already had mayors of German cities participating in our demonstrations. Targeted advocacy is also very important. Now we're closely working with regional governments of Berlin Thuringia and Bremen to launch regional reception programs because, as I mentioned, municipalities are not able to do so, unfortunately, as you said. The German government keeps saying knock it off. But those are success stories that definitely can be shared. But also when it comes to the question, what can be done at the EU level, right? The EU role has been sadly worrying us for a while, so to speak. We think that the new pact proposal, the EU migration pact proposal, would cement and expand the old inefficient deterrent solutions, such as deportation sponsorships and things like fast border procedures without any legal aid or support whatsoever for the asylum seekers. So what we really need at the EU level now is not repeating the old mistakes, but a paradigm shift in thinking about migration away from deterrence, camp systems, and nationalist thinking towards practical national responses using the willingness of the European communities, and finally putting human rights and needs at the center of EU migration policy.
Thank you. And to our two panelists from Italy, I mean, there actually is a plan that has already been approved that was supposed to accomplish this, and simply isn't doing it. And your country is one of the countries that was going to take the pressure off of course, with the relocation and integration strategy. It's not working. But what tactics have you had success with, so that we all can learn from them? Certainly, people watching here today who may want to implement a program like this in their own community, what would you tell them to do? Filippo, go ahead.
Intanto, sì, intanto
Well,
non so se...
first of all, maybe my answer will be disappointing to you. I do not think that Italy is contributing whatsoever to any improvement in the governance of migration flows and welcoming. I'm afraid it's exactly the opposite, unfortunately. And I'm also afraid that the European Council governments have decided to go towards a totally wrong path, which is the European Pact. That is a road that does not learn from the mistakes of the recent past. The former mayor of Grandsang was mentioning the reform of the Dublin regulation, which was approved by the European Parliament, and the fact that governments have not approved it. So they've already made mistakes. But now with the European Pact, they are going exactly the opposite direction that we should take. That is, we should focus on, that is what they want to do. They want to simply prevent asylum seekers from coming to our borders. That is the only effort that governments are making. And I think that the Greens have played a very important role in the European Parliament. But at the moment, I think that there is unfortunately a majority, and I'm talking about all the political forces that are supporting European Commissioner von der Leyen, and they have decided to give room to the requests of the Visegrad countries. Those countries have prevented Europe from going the right direction for the governance of migration flows and welcoming asylum seekers and refugees in Europe. And now the European Pact is following the ideas of the Pact of Visegrad. So they are choosing to prevent people from accessing asylum right in Europe. This has concrete consequences because Europe is welcoming less and less people, whereas in the world, more and more people are escaping, are fleeing. In 2020, more than 80 million people were escaping their homes because they were obliged to do so. And Europe is welcoming less and less people. And this has concrete consequences, but it has also other consequences because European citizens get this message from governments, so they think that we are facing an invasion, and they are more and more negative towards welcoming policies. I think that we should make an effort, and now I answer the question, your question, to tell the truth, simply tell the truth. Europe is a continent that welcomes very little, and not only this, but as we Italians are doing, they are ready to support dictators in very many countries, in Eritrea, Sudan, Libya, provided that no asylum seekers are coming to Europe. For example, in Italy, we have an agreement with Libya, and we have funded groups of criminals, provided that they prevent people from leaving Libya. So my opinion is that the main strategy should be to tell the truth. And the truth is that we are not a welcoming continent. So we should lower the alarm at this moment in Lampedusa, which is one of the isles which is closer to Africa. It's closer to Africa than Italy. So 2,000 people arrived in recent days, and the Italian government, rather than relocating them and welcoming them, they are leaving them on the island as they did in the past. And this shows the idea that we are facing an invasion. We should tell the truth.
Yes, and the numbers bear that out, but people don't read numbers when they see pictures, and it looks to them, as you say, like countries are overrun. Syed, could you provide any best practices, perhaps? And we need to sort of start wrapping this up toward the top of the hour. Is there any positive counterpoint to this? Places that you have seen progress be made with your organizations?
I think it is needed that we should have more collaboration and partnership with the refugee-led organizations and migrant-led initiatives, because that is somehow you can encounter all these negative narratives around migration, because they see that these are like human beings. These are the people that they need protection, that they are in search of protection, and they arrive in Europe to have protection. Yeah. So for this reason, if unfortunately, there are many negative points to highlight. Even we try to highlight some positive points. For example, in many countries, there is no opportunity for refugees and migrants. So in Italy, we do not have any direct interaction with national authorities. This is the problem. Somehow with local authorities, there are like opportunities to influence those policies. And I would like to mention also that these are national and EU policies that makes the things critical on the ground. For example, if we see Lampedusa in Italy, and also the municipalities and islands in Greece, these are the policies that people get stuck in these countries, and they cannot move. And then there is the problem that local communities, they cannot support the burden. No, so it becomes complicated. So for this reason, I think we need to have more refugee-led initiatives and advocacy work in order to make understand the policymakers that we are human beings, that we try to we believe on those values that is the basis of Europe. We are everyone should feel welcomed. Everyone should be part of community of the society, and especially that people can get the protection that they. Unfortunately, if we see, for example, the policies of national countries, if you go in Denmark, now they are trying to also revoke the permit of stay, the protection of Syrian refugees. No, so it somehow lose all efforts that local authorities that they did. So for this reason, we need to do more advocacy to put pressure on national governments and also on, with the EU. Some positive, maybe a positive example.
Just quickly.
That we influence EU policies. If you know, there is this new group of experts on migrants view, which is done by EU Commission. So this is the first mechanism of people with migrant background. They can be heard by European Commission in order to influence policies related to integration, migration, and asylum. So this is as a good practice that we see on EU policy. This is the starting, but we can get this as example and can apply this on local and also national level.
Thank you, Syed. And we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to give each of our panelists 1 minute for a wrap-up thought. But in the meantime, for everyone else, we are going to be posting links after the event to many of the initiatives that you're hearing about here, so that you can catch up, in addition to looking at the map, of course. And also, our panelists are welcome to stay and answer the questions in the Q&A, and I would encourage them to do that. There are questions to you, Damian, specifically about translating your experience to the Commission and the Council. But for each of my panelists, please, in 1 minute or less, let's try to end this depressing year. The coronavirus pandemic has made everything more difficult, has a situation that was already sometimes overwhelming. Please, each of you, give me the one thing that you are looking forward to, or that you think we need to focus on in the coming year, that will increase the open arms of European communities, so that the refugees and migrants see that, and also so that the governments who are now being stumbling blocks will see it. I will go in the reverse order that we spoke. Damian, what is the most important thing for the coming year that we need to focus on, that communities need to focus on, that advocates need to focus on?
Oui, c'est ce qu'il faut faire. C'est comme le disait Filippo tout à l'heure.
Yeah, this is exactly what we are supposed to do. As Filippo was saying, we should have the right perspective, and we have drafted an assessment text on the Dublin system in order to share data, see percentages, and have the right perspective. And the extreme right said, no, we don't want to do it. We don't want people to see data because you're minimizing the problem. No, this is exactly the opposite, because we're explaining that the problem is not so bad in terms of figures. 80–70% of refugees are fleeing, are escaping from their countries, and we are welcoming a very, very small percentage. So welcoming of Europe is just a minimal part, and the population should be informed about it, because migration is used as a flagship theme. You heard about the yellow vests and the enormous debate, and then there was no talk about migration then. But then the President of the Republic, in front of Parliament, decided to talk about migration. Why? Why? Because he had the problem of the yellow vests, and he wanted to distract the public opinion. So the public opinion should be aware of the issue. Let's try and do it in the European Parliament. Let's do it in the media, in the cities, with the citizens. But, and I come to a conclusion, wherever there are welcoming experiences that are working, that are successful, there are no issues with intolerance, with conflicts, with the extreme right. In my city, we welcome so many people, and the extreme right went down in the polls. So this is an excellent example.
Thank you. Thank you. And everyone, please keep your answers short, because the next panel is ready to take over. Lise, what is the most important thing we need to do?
I think the European Union can support municipalities by a more powerful answer and a more powerful way to organize solidarity and realize human rights on a EU level, but also enable municipalities and reinforce them to show their responsibility. They are willing to welcome the people, so the EU has to enable them to really do this and organize a more direct link to the European level and the local level, without the national level as a blockade.
So be kind and then be loud. Right? Make sure everybody knows what you're doing. Filippo.
Sì, ecco, io penso in un minuto, io penso
yes,
che...
in just 1 minute. I think that on the one hand, we should very explicit in our political fight against racism and right-wing political parties, because they are speculating, they are making business on the shoulders of foreign people and of migrants. And we should explain democratic political parties, those who are in favor of democracy, that giving this topic to the right-wing political parties is the best way to lose. And the other thing, we should have a grassroots
sorry, I'm going to have
following.
to, Filippo, I want to give the others a chance. To Syed, what is your one point of advocacy for the coming year as we're coming out of Corona, I hope?
Yeah, I think, so as UNIRE, an European coalition of refugees and migrants, we will aim to more influence policies related to migration integration on local level, national level, on EU level. I think I should mention that in the Europe that we are is guaranteed the human rights and rights of refugees and migrants, especially the people that they flee war, violence, and poverty. I think there should not only be welcoming cities, municipalities, but also borders, national states, and European policies, especially, that they should be also welcoming. Thank you.
And Alina, how can we get there?
Thanks, Terry. So first of all, I'd like to very shortly disagree with Felipe. I don't think we need to proclaim Europe unwelcoming just because the Commission wants us to do so. I think the numbers and the truth on our side. We need to advocate for an active role of cities in EU migration policy, and that was precisely the reason why we, Zeebrugge, but also other NGOs like Open Arms and Mediterranean from Italy launched this European platform From the Sea to the City. And this year we'll be focusing exactly on that. We're going to organize a cities conference together with the city of Palermo in Italy and the German city of Potsdam. The conference is going to be with a lot of participative, a lot of cities from Spain, Italy, France, and Germany. And we will decry the EU deadly policy and demand a different policy based on true solidarity. And I think, and of course, I invite the city of Leuven to join us. Please do that. But
okay, Alina, I have to wrap up.
Just a second, have an important role to play besides direct simplified access to funding. The European Parliament can also help cities raise their voice by offering them public space and standing by their side in advocating for rethinking the EU migration policy.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we've heard some great ideas here. And as the organizers of this event are going to do, they are going to collate all of the ideas that we have. And hopefully you, if you didn't know each other already, will stay in touch. Alina's inviting Lise to her conference. Good things are happening as long as everybody plays their role. So thank you so much to everyone who's joining us. Thank you so much to my panelists. And of course, thank you, Damian, also for launching this event. It was a privilege to be part of it. Now, Damian, thank you very
so
much.
Thank you, Terry, for the great organization. Moderation is the right term. And thank you to all the panelists for the testimonies, experiences, and letting us have a glimpse of your work already and your ideas on this. Alina said it, we are trying to create a space where mayors and positive initiatives can, have a bit of a more public voice. So this is, I think, exactly a good summary of what we're trying to do here. And without further ado, I would love to hand over to Shada, who will lead the next panel on a bit more of a future outlook of what we can do. Thank you so much, Shada.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you also, Terry. What a fascinating conversation, friends. It's been really inspiring. So I'm Shada Islam. I'm an independent commentator here in Brussels, and I've been working on issues to do with migration and integration for several decades now. I write op-eds, and to listen to you has really been a fascinating experience. I've been advocating the role of cities, the role of mayors, the role of civil society and individuals, all of us, in welcoming and showing to the world that actually Europe does in different ways, and not where you're looking especially, but does live up to its values. And we are here in Europe with a paradox, dispiriting attitudes and approaches. We've heard about them from the panelists at the nation state level. And then when you come down to municipalities, local communities, and civil society groups, and all of us, a very inspiring reception and welcome to refugees and asylum seekers coming from us, fleeing conflict, hunger, famine, climate change from across the world. So it's a real pleasure for me really to be moderating the second half of this discussion. So many questions have already been raised, but let's delve a little bit deeper into some of them with our panelists. We have a stellar panel organized by Damien and his wonderful team. Delighted to have with us Jean Bersegian. Jean is the mayor of Strasbourg, elected in the middle of the pandemic, Jean, July 2020. So that was quite an achievement. Welcome to this panel. Julia Trias is joining us from Barcelona Councilor's Offices for Citizens' Rights. Thank you very much, Julia, for being there as well. Actually, we have a panel of women, which is absolutely fantastic. And the moderator happens to be a woman too. So thank you, Damien, for doing that as well. Well done. Anne Dussart from Caritas Belgium. Thank you, Anne, for joining us as well. And Jazine Schwan, she's co-founder and president of Humboldt Viadrina Governance Platform, which is a not-for-profit program funding solutions for societal challenges. Now, rules of engagement have been set out by Terry and Damien. Nothing has changed. Your comments, your questions in the chat box, please. I will keep an eye on them and bring them up with the panelists as we go down in the discussion. We will try and get the panelists to answer them. We have 45 minutes for what's going to be a very, very deep dive into this question of local communities, municipalities, and how they are responding and what your needs are, what your requirements are as we go forward. I'm going to kick off with you, Jeanne, if I may. Ms. Barsegian, so your city's experience, Strasbourg, in welcoming asylum seekers, what's been the reaction from the residents? How have you coped with that? And has it been a warm and welcoming attitude that you've seen, or have you had to actually use persuasive conversations to convince them of the need to be welcoming? Please unmute yourself. The screen is yours, Ms. Barsegian.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci beaucoup de votre invitation. Je suis ravie de pouvoir intervenir.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm very pleased to be able to take the floor on a subject that is very dear to us, especially to Strasbourg, which is a capital in Europe and a capital of democracy and human rights, a city that has a humanitarian tradition and that has always placed a lot of attention on welcoming and integrating newcomers. So to address your question, and you said this in your introduction, very often cities are at the forefront when it comes to action, but also they are at the forefront in terms of elaborating solutions more flexibly than states can afford to do. I think that Strasbourg welcoming policy is strong because it co-constructs and creates dialogue among the various stakeholders in our area. It is this dialogue that is ongoing between the municipality, the state departments, and the various protagonists of local solidarity that has brought up a true policy for welcoming immigrants and refugees. Even before I took office, and I'd like to thank my colleague who in the previous term had promoted the creation of a manifesto for a dignified and a decent welcoming of people in the city of Strasbourg, there's another dimension. The city of Strasbourg is one of the founding members of Anvita, which is an association that I have chaired for the past few months and weeks that had been established with the cooperation of Damien Karem, who spoke in the previous panel, that is carrying out various activities such as promoting access to housing, the creation of measures that will grant better access to housing, and for people who first reaching our country, granting them services of mental health, information, public services, in particular with all the organizations and centers that welcome them in the city. Through a guide to solidarity, as we called it, that gathers all the information about this. Now, this brings me back to the question you were asking. How do Strasbourg residents experience this policy of welcoming refugees. Although I cannot speak on behalf of each and every one of them, there is a lot of mobilization and solidarity that has existed for the past several years through a growing number of initiatives that take place in the city itself, and also reception initiatives in families and associations that directly welcome migrants in their own homes, creating a solidarity network. I have to say that from this point of view, and although this clearly can be instrumentalized, as Damien Carême explained, especially at the national level. At the local level, things go well. They're going well with very little hostility expressed as such, and contrary to that, lots of solidarity initiatives are seen around here. This is all I have to say about it.
So thank you very much, Jeanne. So local level, it's going well, solidarity rather than hostility. And you pointed to three things. You've talked about the structures that exist, the tradition that exists, the services exist, and also initiatives at the local level from personalities, individuals. So a nice mix of, let's say, constructive approaches coming from different areas. Let me turn to you, Julia, from Barcelona. Is this something that you share as well, that there's, unlike sometimes at a national level, you have the structures, you have the traditions, you have the initiatives, and all of this comes together to provide a welcome that is perhaps not available at a higher level, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Screen is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting us too. Yes, so it's a little bit the same as Strasbourg. Here in Barcelona, we are proud to say that we are an open city, and that in any case, during the so-called refugee crisis, so 2015-16, we had huge demonstrations around Barcelona under the claim, we want to welcome you. So for us, it was clear, for the City Council of Barcelona, it was clear that we had given by the citizens the mandate to engage in more proactive policies and welcome asylum seekers and refugees. So, because same as Strasbourg, we had previous structures that placed maybe Barcelona as a city that, yeah, maybe for 20 years ago, we have been having policies in this regard, but it was clear for us that the situation changed in 2016-17 or 15-16, and that as the City Council, we had to have like the level that the city was demanding us and the citizens. So at the same time, we went from receiving back then in 2016 2,000 asylum seekers to almost 9,500 in 2019. So these two situations made us or created an opportunity to us to at least engage in two different plans that were framed under a big initiative called Barcelona Refugee City, that we shared also as Strasbourg with big NGOs and associations working towards the protection of refugees' rights together. And then we had lots of actions within this framework, but one of them was to increase our resources devoted to our local service for welcoming migrants and refugees, which maybe afterwards I would like to develop a little bit further if I can. But secondly, we create a pioneer local program called Nausicaa. The program offers shelter, legal, psychological, labor insertion advice, and it's addressed to refugees that have ended the national program or that maybe they have been excluded from it. So even if at the local level we don't have direct competencies regarding asylum, we saw this opportunity in terms of what we were talking about on what cities can do beyond their competencies, their framework, if there's political will, and we created this Nausicaa. It's also working right now also, and it's working very well. For instance, we have a 46% rate of labor insertion of all the refugees that are willing to be in this program called Nausicaa. So yeah, it's a little bit the same issue. I think that if cities want, even if we don't have enough competencies, we have if we have the will and the resources and the structure, and very important, the citizenship willingness to welcome refugees, I think we can do a lot.
Thank you, Julia and Jean. And I just want to have a quick follow-up with both of you, perhaps on one question that's been coming up repeatedly on the chat and really just preoccupy myself as well. It's really, you are doing fantastic work, if I may say so. And, you know, people like myself are very much aware of it. But these stories are not being covered by mainstream media, by journalists, by television stations, or if they are, they come sporadically, and the stories then get, you know, overshadowed by the larger picture of which is really of, hostility, unwelcome, and Europe, which is a fortress. And can I get from you, both you and Jean, Julia, first with you, Julia, what do we need to do to get the media engaged and to tell the stories of what's happening at what, if I may say, is the urban level, the grassroots level, the municipal level? Please, very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. I think it was discussed at the previous panel at the end of it. And I disagree a little bit of the last, I mean, it was, some of the panelists were talking about that we should engage in a more explicit way on welcoming refugees. And here in Barcelona, we have a little bit different experience in this sense, and it's to apply a little bit the intercultural perspective. So it's not only to talk about what a refugee can be as an added value for our societies, because you are keeping you keep using the framework of some right political parties or interests beyond that makes a barrier between the citizens and the refugees, and why we should welcome refugees. So for Barcelona, we are trying to do this, and we are treating them or talking about them as one other neighbor, like any other neighbor. Right. So we are talking about neighbors, and then we are putting different examples from people that was born here to people that did not.
So the concept of we, us, rather than us and them. Jean, if I could ask you the same question. Ms. Barsegian, if I could ask you the same question about engagement with media, getting the story out.
Oui, je crois qu'il y a vraiment une responsabilité de mettre en...
Yes, I think that there is a responsibility. We should try and disseminate those initiatives and those positive stories about welcoming. And I think that the objective of municipal networks or city networks like our city is exactly the following. That is, maybe there is a majority idea in the media, and we should offset this with more positive stories that can, so that we can raise our voice as well. And I think it should be interesting if we were able to work locally with a network about these projects to make them known and to show concretely what cities are doing, positive stories that can be a source of inspiration for other areas. So we can leave this taboo idea. For some people, this is a taboo idea. For some local representatives, for some local administrators, this can be a taboo. And this is our responsibility. We should write together and make this new story known, which is different from the story of the majority.
Thank you very much indeed, Jean. Let me turn now to Anne and Jazine from the civil society point of view. And let me start with you, Anne, first of all. You've heard Jean and Julia talk about, you know, the different initiatives, the structures, the traditions that exist. From your point of view, what can be done to bring all of this into a more coordinated fashion so we really have engagement with the European institutions, with national governments, and we are highlighting that there is another narrative, and positive, constructive narrative that is out there about asylum and refugees. Floor is yours.
Okay, Thank you. Thank you. We heard already a lot, and I can agree on a lot of things that was said. And I'm also very happy that Leuven was invited as municipality city, who is a very social, like it was said, a social city. But we have other cities also in Belgium. My concern, big concern on the narrative, starts on the top and start on the grassroots. And we have to try to bring all these things together. And who will be the glue? Who will put the gaps all together? This is the big questions. And I highlight, and also this initiatives you're taking today is so important, that municipality are today speaking and spokespersons for their activities on European level. But what my point of view as biggest difficulties today is that, in my opinion, municipalities are not enough involved in the whole process. The process that national and EU decisions are taken on a higher level, the process of relocating people or to pledge for resettlement is not taking consideration with the local actors. I heard the colleague Lies telling about the concrete initiative she took to the national government about the Moira, about the problems in Greece. It's typical how it's happening now today in Belgium. There was a wake-up call, there was an initiative of solidarity municipalities writing letters to the national government, receiving no answer at all, that these 13 and only 13 unaccompanied minors arrived in Belgium. It's through our initiatives as Caritas, because we were designed as guardian for this unaccompanied minor, that we could mention to municipalities that they are safe, that they are in foster families, that they are in good health, and that there is a following up, that they are integrated. I think this is really a missing point from our national governments, and we need really to work on that. And this is for me the main point. We're putting the glue. There is solidarity, there is still solidarity on local level. And what was said before is also fully true. There is a political decision to be afraid of people. They are just like us. They are people. They are searching to be welcoming by the municipalities, by the volunteers, by civil society. And we are all doing that on the ground. So let's speak, like was said also before, let's speak to the media, let's put faces just about people and not about putting them in a box, but they are just people that are in our municipalities where we are working with. And so I think this is the main challenge that we face today, especially in Belgium, but probably also in many other countries.
Absolutely, Anne, thank you very much. Jazine, let me come to you. You've really looked at this issue as a political scientist. You've looked at this issue in great depth. And I've read some wonderful papers that you've written, your organization has put forward. And one of the things I think you would agree with what Anne has said, there is this disconnect between municipalities and what's happening at the EU level and the national level. And one of the things you've suggested is the creation of a European Integration and Municipal Development Fund, because this is a big issue, isn't it? Municipalities don't have direct access, or indirect access actually only exists for access to European development funds or regional funds, etc. So give us your views, please. Screen's yours.
Thank you very much, Shada, and thank you for having invited me. Well, in fact, from the analytical point of view, I think the real obstacles against a good and peaceful cooperation and political solution are the national governments. And by that, of course, also the European Union by the European Council, because this is a decisive institution. If the municipalities had direct access to the decision making, it would be much easier. And I have read some days ago, we have now about 600 European cities, more than 600, which are ready to welcome refugees, which have declared that. That means this is already a very important step. About, I would say 3-4 years ago, there was always a question, do you find cities which are ready to welcome? Yes, we have cities. And so one important step is to influence the public opinion, saying there is the possibility, there is not no exit or no issue, no solutions. There is a solution. The second point is, from the judicial point of view, as well in the European Union as in the national states, still the national governments have the say about whom and how many people to receive. And as long as we will try to find a general obligating solution for the European Union, we won't find anything. Therefore, I am pleading for a voluntary solution. That means for a coalition of the willing of states, of governments, which would be ready to say, okay, we cooperate with our cities, with our municipalities, saying we are ready to share, and not share a burden, but share a responsibility. And then to find visible, clear, positive solutions. And of course, the financing is important. I know there were some programs as the Urban Innovation Action, where cities, as European cities, succeeded in having direct financing from Brussels. But in general, the direct financing from Brussels, which would be the most clear and the best working way how cities could welcome refugees, this direct financing is not, I mean, it's opposed by national governments because, of course, it's a loss of power. That's very, very simple. They want to be the filter, so to say. They want to be the watching dogs and to see, and also they want to keep some of the money which would go to the cities for their level. So the second point is to show, and connected to this idea is that in order to facilitate also in the public opinion the welcome of refugees, I would make it a voluntary decision of cities in the frame of their development ideas. We have made a number of experiences that people, if they can take part in decision making, if they can co-determine what happens, they will agree, but they don't want to be kind of obligated and not having any say in these decisions. So if we could have a coalition of willing states, and if we would have a European funding and cities in their development plans, not only for receiving migration, but in general, in their development plans, in the sustainability goals also, they could say, well, we, for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, from the demographic point of view, from the moral point of view, whatsoever, from the sustainability point of view, we would like to have about, I don't know, 1,000 refugees we would like to welcome. And we would integrate that. So the whole thing would not have such a scandal character that foreigners will come to our cities. But this is part of the general development of our cities. And these are new co-inhabitants who will help us, who will be not integrated into a majority society of the cities, but we all have to integrate anew and anew, because from any generation, we have no challenges. We have new challenges of integration, even if they are all from Barcelona or all from Strasbourg or from Berlin. These are all the time constant integration necessities. And so I would plead for a European fund to finance municipalities' development, and it would be the municipalities who would decide, and that would also take all the arguments from the right wing, because if the municipalities decide by themselves that from their idea, their humanity, but also from their interests, I am not against interests, if they want to develop in the way that they would welcome 10% for the further population from abroad, that's okay, and then the right wing can't say anything. It is still to do it voluntarily, and I am quite convinced that we will find sufficient municipalities, especially, and this is the second or the last point, I would offer to the municipalities that they would not only get financed their integration of refugees, but to the same amount, the financing of their own purposes, so that the argument there is no justice because the refugees get all the money and the poor in our cities lose all the money or don't have apartments whatsoever, if that can be overcome. So I would propose that cities which welcome refugees would get the amount for the integration costs, etc., but to the same amount can also bring forward projects, housing whatsoever, so that everybody would have profit out of it or have a chance with it. By the way, these are also, as I read just a few days ago, new programs in Africa, where you have large camps. And if you try to overcome these camps as a, so to say, a foreign city within a country, and if you want to find a common solution, integrating solution, you have, of course, also to offer to the population that they would have an advantage as well. And if you have such an understanding of justice, I think you can do it smoothly. A voluntary cooperation of governments, a voluntary decision-making about the welcome, and the additional financing of, additional to the integration, also for the development of those municipalities which welcome refugees, I think that would work.
Thank you very much, Jazine. In fact, what you're suggesting is that we have an inclusive approach where countries, cities receive funding for refugees, but also for the global community. So it doesn't create this disconnect, and there is no envy, if you like, of what, or jealousy of what. So thank you very much. Let me turn to Jeanne and Julia. Actually, Jazine and Anne have put forward their recommendations, and coalition of the willing of the cities working together, access to development funds, European funds, and that demands quite a bit of autonomy for mayors and city municipalities in dealing with issues to do with refugees and asylum seekers. Now, you have talked about your traditions, your structures, your services, individual initiatives and all that, but this is going a little bit beyond that. This is actually interacting with national governments with a very strong voice and very strong requests and recommendations of being involved at the decision-making level. So Jeanne, if I could start with you, what is your experience? Have national governments been positive? Have you brought up these issues? What's been the reaction? And also then Julia, for you, the same thing, but also if you could bring in the European level as well. So Jeanne, can I give you the screen first?
On a finalement assez peu de liens directs avec le gouvernement en tant que tel. On est plutôt...
We have few direct connections to the government as such, but we do have connections to the local state services that are delocalized here, such as the prefecture of the central government, and our relationships with the prefecture are not just very direct, but also very routinely entertained, and that is especially targeting the housing issue, which is what we are mostly involved on. Now, we're not really talking about funding. And also the housing issue depends on the French government, and we have had to acknowledge the fact that since the French government has not undertaken that commitment in a decisive way, we as a city, as a municipality, have had to decide to fund the local needs directly from local funding. So I committed with my team to create social measures that will last the 6 years of my term. We have created 200 initiatives with local associations in order to respond to real needs. And we've done all this to demonstrate to the central government that we were taking at least part of the responsibility and the financial burden, but also for the central government, there was a need to take responsibility and provide funding as necessary. We're now just getting out of 1 year where cooperation was paradoxically very good, and the health crisis accelerated dialogue and also encouraged the French government to take over complex situations. So we've had an opportunity to take care of people who were welcomed in hotels. So the problem is when the health crisis is over, all these people will be in the streets again. So we have opened this dialogue, but we are very demanding. So we will keep putting the pressure on the state services at the local level to find a solution so that these people can still have a roof on their heads.
Thank you very much, Jan. Can I just ask you, is there a positive attitude? Because I mean, the let's say the policy approach that the French government is taking is quite different from what you are describing at the Strasbourg level. So this disconnect, does it mean that actually the cooperation you said has been good because of the pandemic, but do you see it improving over the next 5 years of your term?
Ah bah, je crois que c'est tout le défi et malheureusement.
I believe that is the challenge, actually, and unfortunately I have no answer to this question, but what I'm seeing for the time being is that the French government has adopted a pretty ambiguous stance, and I think we might agree on the fact that we are not facing a migration crisis, but a welcoming crisis, at least in France, and the situations that we needed to face up to at the local level are national policy and European policy matters that are taken care of by a government which is far from having a specific intention, at least on this level. At the local level, when you need to take care in an emergency of humanitarian problems, you find solutions, but these solutions are not necessarily going to last forever. So our role is to keep encouraging collectively these are the players as a network and more.
Thank you very much. So we have about 7-8 minutes to go. Julia, if I could ask you to respond to that question, and then I'll turn to Anne and Jazine as well, looking ahead to see how we're going to be able to actually in practice improve this so that we do live up to European values when it comes to welcoming refugees and asylum seekers. So Julia, please, screen's yours.
Yeah, thank you, Shada. I will try to be brief then. I will address, first of all, the relationship we have with the national level. So here in Barcelona, we have something that it's a little bit special if we compare it with other cities at the European level, at least, that we have our migrant and refugees services are unified. So it's a one-stop shop. Where you are a migrant or a refugee, you go to the same facility, which is shared between the local level and the national level. So this is something that it's very good in terms of collaboration between the local level and the national level, because at the end, at least in Barcelona, and I think everywhere, that the needs of asylum seekers and refugees are very similar to the migrants, and also regarding shelters sometimes and labor sometimes, also to the citizens that were born here. So it's something that unifying, it's something that it's useful, but also at the shelter, as Strasbourg was talking about, we had also to increase our resources on shelter for refugees. Because the state level is also contributing to it, but it's not enough, because we are really on these migrant and refugee services, we are more and more attending refugees than migrants, but the share of resources is really different, and we are trying to, through this collaboration with the state, to try to change it a little bit. But also we have good examples of cooperation between the national level and the local level. For instance, as you may know, all of you, we have a crisis at the Canary Islands, and we proposed Barcelona to accompany and to accommodate and provide shelter to people that are in the Canary Islands. And we had a bilateral agreement between the city of Barcelona and the national level. And now I think we have been, for 3 months, we have this facility, this municipal facility, and we have been sheltering 100 more or less refugees. So
you find solutions. Basically what you're saying, Julia, you're finding wonderful solutions to what are national problems, but you're not getting the kind of resources, financial support that you would need. So I think this is emerging for me as somebody who's been writing about this for some time, really turning into the crux of the problem. I mean, if you are doing so much, as Jazine has pointed out, you should have the ability, the facility of acceding at least to part of the resources that are needed for the very, very real hospitality and welcome procedures, the structures that you need, the services that you need. And you've talked also about the mental needs, the traumatic experiences of some of the people you're seeing. So thank you very much, Julia. Let me turn to Anne and Jazine for their final words on some of the issues that have been raised during this conversation. So 3 minutes for you, Anne, and then 3 minutes for you, Jazine, please.
Okay, thank you. I think what is important to underline, and that we see as a civil society organization, is that we need to be careful, even we speak about the we and about the people, that there is a certain vulnerability for these people. And so that we need to take them also in consideration when they access first, in the first period, that we have a special attention for them. And then I think it's very important to include also cultural mediators. If we want to involve more cities, and especially for Belgium, we see small cities, they are a little bit afraid because they don't know what it is. And so if we put everybody in a mainstreaming position, then we will have some problems. So I think to work together with civil society organization that can be a supporting role, and not that the national government see us as an opposite, but as a partner in this whole, I think this could be an added value to have more cities that welcoming, that we have this coalition of the willing that growing also for small cities. With the share network in Europe, we also try to work on that. For rural areas can also be a welcoming city. So not only the big cities has their responsibility. I think this is very important, that even in small city, you can integrate, you can feel welcome. And like the first panelist was saying, it's the welcoming from the pizza man who give him the hosting is very important. And a second, and then I end, the most important problem that cities face is the housing of these refugees. And I think there is an urgent need to think about innovative ways of housing, and also that municipalities are innovative when you offer some houses who are not fully in the legal status of the rules of the housing rules, that we can be more open also for that, because housing is something we see everywhere, and for that we need finance. We are working now on the community sponsorship. We have a lot of groups, but we are looking for housing for these groups. So I think this is also something that we can pointing out as a kind of problem that is easily solvable.
Easily solved, but sometimes has to be actually tackled head on. As you said, smaller cities, smaller municipalities, but also the question of housing. Jazine, your final words, please.
Yeah, I think this is in fact all very important, and I'm really impressed by what you are all doing in Strasbourg, in Barcelona, and in Belgium. I would say it even a little bit broader, and you mentioned, Anne, you mentioned the importance of civil society. I think what is absolutely needed is to find very close and good and personal social context and embedding of those who come to our cities. Because if we ask the other way around, when do people leave the cities where they have been positioned by a central state agency? They do leave it because they are not really socially tied, so to say, to the society of the city. And these social bonds are important. We have experienced it also in Eastern Germany, which is not that much used to have contact with foreigners. But even there, if you have a decided administration and civil society and also economic companies, if you arrange as much personal context as possible so that the people would meet and would know each other, and there would not be entities far away from, but our neighbors, as you started with, Julia, then it will be fun. It's housing, of course, but and I agree with you, it's not only the big cities. On the contrary, it's the smaller cities. It is even in the country that you have, it is easier to have these social contexts because people know each other, etc. So use at every point, so to say, the possibilities to make life valuable for everybody, for those who come and for those who live, and create good ties. And what I am always very much in love on, in a small Eastern German city, there was an initiative to play theater together. Those who have lived in the small city for a long while and those who have arrived. And they have also made role change. That means they have compose a theater piece, and those who have lived in the cities were suddenly the migrants and the refugees, and those who have arrived to the city had to play the role of those who have always been there. And this has become a very important integration activity and cultural activity for all inhabitants of that small city. And when they showed their production in La Mairie, there was always plenty of people to look. It's like in a school presentation, you know, and you have your children and play for, I don't know, Noel. The same was true for that country. Play and have fun and have cultural ties and laugh together. This is extremely important.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jazine. Thank you very much to all four of you, to Jean, Julia, Jazine, and Anne. You brought forward the macro level, what you're doing at the macro level, at the city level, but also down to the roots, laughing together, cooking together, playing together, but also the impediments, the obstacles you face in your desire, actually, and what you're doing to welcome more refugees, asylum seekers. Unfortunately, as we look ahead, there are probably going to be more asylum seekers when we see what's happening in the Middle East, when we see what's happening in Africa, but also, I have to say, in Afghanistan. So I think we need to be prepared, and it's values like yours and personalities like yours and residents like us that are going to make the difference. So with that, let me bring this panel to a close. Thank you very much indeed, all four of you, wonderful ladies and doing great work. It's my pleasure now to, Damien, would you like to take the floor?
I'm happy to do it as well. Either way works. Thank you so much, Shada. I just wanted to say this quickly, also for the great moderation. I mean, this has been a very insightful panel again. So thanks a lot for the amazing work on this. And and also to obviously all the panelists. I'll hand over then, if it's okay for you, Shada, to Laura Corrado, who's the head of the Legal Migration and Integration Unit in DG Home. Great to have you with us for some remarks on and reactions maybe to what we just heard.
Thanks very much, Damian, and good afternoon to everybody. Yes, I have been following most of the discussions, so I will try to react to some of the points, also to address at least some of the issues that have been raised in general, also about the Migration and Asylum Pact, and of course the role of the national governments and the cities in there. So first of all, I mean, I would like to start by saying, and of course, as we put the pact on the table as European Commission, I feel also a bit obliged to, if not to defend everything, but at least to explain the rationale, which is certainly not to prevent access to asylum or to prevent access to the EU as such, to asylum seekers and to migrants. As you are aware, the situation has been very difficult for many years about the management of migration in Europe. That there are different interests. The reality is that not all member states have the same views and interest about migration and asylum. And this has been ongoing for many years and has blocked indeed also in the past the agreement on the reform of the Dublin regulation inter alia. So what we have been trying to do with the Migration Pact, which is on the table, is to try to unblock this situation and to take into account the different interests in a way that we could really make proposals that would address the different aspects. So manage better migration and asylum, of course, guarantee and ensure the right of asylum, clearly, also ensure a better and effective, let's say, management of the external borders, but also better channel the people into asylum procedures and have more efficient also asylum procedure for those in need of protection. But also be aware that today, and these are the latest Eurostat data, the positive decision to recognize not only refugee status, but protection status are about 40%, the recognition rate. So, which means that there are a lot of persons that are applying for asylum that might have very legitimate reasons to come to Europe, but who are not people in need of protection, actually. So we really need also to think about this aspect and about the fact that we need to manage effectively asylum and migration. And it does not mean that if people are not in need of protection, they don't have legitimate reasons to come. We have about 3 million of people that are issued a residence permit by EU member states every year for different reasons, labor, students, family reunification, some also protection, researchers. So it is not true that we are Fortress Europe. I agree that some of politicians, and in most cases are the national politicians, acknowledge they are exploiting migration for political purposes. And this is, of course, it's not helpful to have a rational debate on migration and to agree on rules that function for all of us, for all of Europe. So I think this is something that I wanted to mention. And also when it comes to asylum, it is true that, the resettlement needs for people who are in need of protection and that should be resettled to the EU or to other countries without having to go into dangerous journeys. I mean, we should do much more. There are 1.4 million of people in need of resettlement, as estimated by the UNHCR. And of course, we are only resettling overall, and not only the EU, a minimum part of that. And we should increase this. And I think from the EU side, even if the number are not huge, we have increased a lot the resettlement efforts since 2015, based also on incentives, financial incentives provided by the Commission and by the EU to EU resettlement schemes. So it's over 8,000 since 2015, on top of other national resettlement programs. So I think we are also trying to address, let's say, the management of migration on all its components, including the need to provide safe and legal pathways for migration, for people in need of protection, and for those who want to come for other legitimate reasons, and so on. So now, coming to the role of the municipalities and to the relations, of course, the role of the cities, because this is very important. Clearly, it is true that, I mean, there isn't, every member state has its own structure and administratively with different competencies attributed to the different level of powers, be it the region, the lender, and the cities. And of course, it is also, our main interlocutor in terms of European institution commissions are, generally speaking, the governments. But of course, it does not mean that we do not work with the cities, we do not cooperate with the cities. And I will come also to the funding part, which has been raised also a lot today. We do. We have, in particular, we have adopted last year the action plan on integration and inclusion, which is a responsibility under my direct responsibility. And of course, there is a lot of accent about the role of the cities and in general of local and regional authorities when it comes to first reception, housing, integration more general, and inclusion of migrants and refugees. And of course, we have already developed a lot of actions in direct cooperation with the city and with the local and regional authorities. I saw that in the chat there was a reference to these cities and regions for integration from the Committee of the Region. It is a shared initiative from the Commission and from the Committee of the Region, which we have very much pushed. We have the urban agenda, and I think this is with a partnership on integration and inclusion. And there were some questions about the Dutch cities. The city of Amsterdam, it's one of the coordinators together with DG Home of this partnership on inclusion and integration. And I think this is very interesting because this partnership does not only have cities, there are also some member states, there is the European Commission. So it's an attempt to really have a multi-level of governance, which is also something we are really pushing for as Commission. We have been trying, in particular in the field of the integration, to also encourage member states. We have a network of member states, the European Integration Network, to bring along also the cities and the local and regional authorities to have a dialogue there where it does not exist. Now, also concretely, in a very concrete way, and I come a bit to the funding, which I think it's a very important point for all cities. This is also something, of course, that we have been reflecting upon and see also how we could improve the access to funding in what is now the new multi-annual financial framework, because it is true that main recipients are in general the managing authorities at national level. And this, at least for the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, this remains the case for about 60% of the funding. However, I think we have included a number of changes compared to the current Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund. And I think thanks also to the support of the European Parliament on that, I have to say, first of all, we have made the partnership principle compulsory also for all the actions under the Asylum, Integration and Migration Fund. This is something which is applied already under the Structural Cohesion Fund, but this is something that now was not really, was very soft, let's say, in the previous HAMIF. And now the national governments are obliged to consult and to take into account the views of the local and regional authorities, the civil society, and other stakeholders when they are planning, programming the use of the AMIF fund and also the implementation. So we look forward to that, and we will be monitoring this when member states are preparing the national programs for the AMIF fund. We have also foreseen higher co-financing rates, up to 90% for all the integration measures and projects implemented by the local and regional level. We have foreseen also that 15% under the AMIF program has to be, and this is thanks to the Parliament, I have to say, have to be allocated to legal migration and integration. And there is minimum amount of 5% under the thematic facility, which is the money directly managed by the Commission, and on top of the national programs that has to target local and regional authorities implementing integration measure. And of course, then we have the regional funds where, of course, the region have the specific role. There are other programs, like indeed the urban innovative actions, where there is a more direct access to the funding. But I think we have done the utmost that we could do to really facilitate the access to funding and also to ensure that funding would be used also for the local and regional level.
Perfect. Laura, now you have been muted, but we also have to come to an end. So maybe if you can close, that would be amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So this is just to say that, of course, the role of the municipalities and local regional authorities, it is stronger when it comes to integration. And as Commission, we have done a lot to really strengthen these ties and to implement these partnership principles also with the local authorities.
Perfect.
But okay, I think there are other follow-up questions where I can expand further on maybe some aspects. Thank you.
Let's see if people can stay a bit longer. But then we would now have the concluding remarks by my colleagues Tineke, Ernest, and Saskia. So we start with Tineke.
Thanks a lot for organizing this and for all our campaign teams and officers and members who made this possible. And I think this webinar also shows how much support there is for welcoming policies from municipalities and regions I think this is also a very important message to the governments of the member states, who need to also decide together with the European Parliament on a new pact on responsibility sharing. Just a few words, because we are with 3 and then we're almost going to an end. I just want to say something about the new pact, because of course we had high expectations from the new proposals from the Commission, because responsibility sharing needs to be strengthened. I think that was supported by many actors. We as the Greens already had a proposal ahead of the new pact, and there we, just like Mrs. Schwan also said, we very much emphasized the role of municipalities and the voluntary character of it, because we really believe in welcoming communities are the best atmosphere for a good integration process. So it benefits both the communities and the refugees. So our proposal was actually to have an immediate responsibility sharing system from the borders, so immediately distribution, where the municipalities could also choose and say, you know, how many people they would like to host. And with a lot of funding, indeed, not only the asylum procedures, but also very generously also including all types of the integration process. What we see now in the pact is actually turning it the other way around. There is a voluntary character, but this is for the member states with no role for municipalities. And there is no guarantee in the end that if the number of pledges are not sufficient, that member states offer, that there's no guarantee that there will be sufficient relocation in the end. And this is something of a big concern for our group, because we fear that this is to the detriment of both the member states, the border countries, and to the refugees, of course, who will stay contained in overcrowded camps and also run the risk of long terms of detention if you look at the big emphasis on the border procedures so fast procedures in closed centers.
So Tineke, I think we need to come to the next step.
Just one remark. It did not meet our expectations. I think it's very important that all municipalities were heard now, all the regions use their leverage, use their force to put pressure on their governments to change this pact and to make sure that there will be sufficient solidarity sharing in the end in the new legislation. And, you know, you can count on us that we do the same in the European Parliament. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Next one is Ernest.
Thank you, Damian. I will try to be extremely brief. I would like to thank all the speakers. It has been really an interesting session. I think that a couple of things need to be said. Firstly, when there was a stunning lack of solidarity in member states in welcoming refugees, we need to acknowledge that it was mainly the cities and the civil society who really made the pledge for solidarity. And I think that this role of policy advocating towards the member states and the European institutions has been in the past extremely important. And I think that in a way, this obliges us also to support their role, as Tineke was saying. And I don't want to say that nothing has happened, because it's true. And I think the representative of the Commission said that the AMIF now has a better co-management together with the cities. This is something that in the last legislature, which we pushed very much for, that in the new regulation of the AMIF, the cities would have a strong role recognized. But of course, this is not enough. And I would like also to join my voice to Tineke in saying that we don't see exactly, we don't see how this role is being recognized in the new migration pact. So we are still, and we have been listening to the different cities this afternoon. Many of them willing to welcome asylum seekers, putting efforts and financial instruments in place, but then not having the necessary means to really welcome them because they get blocked at the European and the member state level. So I think that this is something we should really reflect upon, on how after many years where the cities have been at the forefront of politically pushing for a welcoming Europe, how can we now empower really them so they can play their part. So I think that in that sense, Damian, I would like to thank you, because I think that the sharing of experiences this afternoon was really fantastic. And I hope that the session helped everybody in really trying to find proposals and ideas to make really the cities to be at the forefront of changing the policies at the members at the new level. Thank you so much, Damian.
Thank you, Ernest. Saskia.
Merci beaucoup. Eh bien, j'ai le tout dernier mot de la fin après ces impressionnantes interventions de vous toutes
I will
et
have the
tous.
last
Et merci pour ça.
word
Alors, je dirais
on
Europe
this. I'd
welcomes.
like
C'est vraiment le message
say
clé
Europe
qui est
welcomes.
envoyé
That's a
depuis
key
de nombreux
message
pays
that we
européens.
have circulated
Et depuis la
from the
Belgique, moi j'ai un
European
écho.
level
Je ne sais
and
pas si
from Belgium
avec
as well.
la
There's
traduction.
an echo, and I'm not sure where it comes from. I hope you don't hear it, so I'll keep speaking. This is the message I would like to convey to all the local associations, the local stakeholders, the cities and the others that carry out activities that our governments are falling short of carrying out. We don't have many other means. The elections in 2015 have not done what we expected, because Europe has become a fortress even more than it was. And so it's a Europe that will never be able to welcome people. And this policy is really killing people, as the case of the Mediterranean is proving. But there are also people working on the side of solidarity, with people appealing to the European Union and the European Commission, asking them to support the efforts to welcome these people, to house these people, without continuing funding for pushbacks. Quite the contrary, quite the opposite of that. So all the means will have to be reoriented to solidarity, and that is the message that we need to convey out loud today. That's a message also for the dignity of people that we wanted to speak on behalf of, and that concerns the millions of volunteers who are striving to help and assist the refugees. Going back to the initial values of the European Union, this is my invitation. I'd like to confirm Commissioner Johansson in support of the activities in favor of migrants reaching the Italian borders. But the European Union should do more, and our governments need to commit firsthand in structural solidarity. This is something that we've heard again and again in the local committees that are playing a key role in these long-term political process. These initiatives are making the European Union proud, and what makes it possible for us to fill the ambassadors of this message. Thank you all, and I'd like to thank the team for organizing this webinar. Please do not hesitate to circulate this campaign, because the goal is to demonstrate and show all the solidarity initiatives
Thank you,
throughout
Saskia, for these closing remarks. Thank you, all colleagues. Thank you, everyone who is here. And please feel free to spread this positive message, as Saskia has said, as far and wide as you can. Europe welcomes, and I wish you all a very good long weekend. Bye-bye.